Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. That's my guy.
Hey, what is up, everybody? My name is Steven, and welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited for this episode where we get to tier these different Chargers players. And I really used my science brain for this one, and I consulted with Acho to figure out what's a good formula to come up with this. So what I came up with is the Chargers GOAT score, because it's a very important thing. Yeah. I have Yak times swagger divided by touchdowns plus TikTok dances. So that's what we're going to use tonight. So if we're wrong, sorry, I have to go back to the drawing board and work that one out.
Yeah, apparently that's how we are figuring out who the GOAT is these days, is scientific math that was given to us by Emmanuel Acho, who played 3 years in the NFL. So good for him. Just a banner week so far for FS1 media hosts. Joy Taylor talking about Caitlin Clark was not great. Colin Cowherd continues to doubt the Kansas City Chiefs.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate that. Somehow that's the least bad take of an FS1 media member so far this week. So banner week for FS1. Truly job well done, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, excited to bring you guys this better coverage of sports. I don't know. Let me know where we're at. You guys can tier us with the FS1 there, but hopefully we can bring some rational, maybe even math and numbers based takes to you guys.
Yes, and as everyone's saying in the chat, Kevin Durant's response was wonderful. Just outstanding.
Yep.
He's probably the best athlete on social media when it comes to responding to trolls. Nobody really does it better. And I love that for him. So, he absolutely just ratioed the hell out of Emmanuel Acho, and it was fantastic. And that will be something I remember for a long time. So should be fun. Like Tyler mentioned, we are here today to tier the Chargers offensive starters. We'll do the defensive side on Thursday. We like doing this episode just because it kind of gives us a check-in of where the Chargers roster is really at in terms of where guys can kind of become blue chip players, etc. Gets you a feel for what the kind of quality of depth the Chargers have, I think, as well. So it's just a fun episode. Before we dive in today, obviously the basketball finals have come to its conclusion. Thoughts and prayers out to Tyrese Halliburton. Just absolutely gutted to watch that happen. In a game 7 that looked like it was going to be a true classic game 7. It's a long recovery, tearing an Achilles, so hopefully he's able to come back from that. But the Prize Picks action does not stop with the end of those finals. Obviously, you have women's basketball, you have men's baseball out there. I know a couple weeks ago the Dodgers and the Padres played each other. It was pure just comedy as a non-baseball fan watching everything that unfolded there. The fans don't like each other when that happens. The players apparently don't like each other either. But you can still make money off of that kind of rivalry. Going to Prize Picks on whatever app store you use. Use the code GUILTY at checkout. And that is the best way to support our show and yourself as well. So again, download the app today. Use the code GUILTY to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, code GUILTY at checkout to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Okay, so we've done the show for a long time. I think we kind of wanted to start the show by contrasting where the Chargers were at last year compared to this year. And then we'll dive into kind of debating where each of these players are at now currently. I think there's some players who you guys probably know where we're going to put them, and we'll explain kind of the tiers and things like that. But we wanted to start by revisiting last year's conversations that we had at this time about where this offense is at.
Yeah, I think it's always good to revisit this and see what worked, what didn't, what our process was. So we'll go through it really quickly. We have a much better, more interesting looking template, I think, and tier maker template to use later. But just real quick to make it easy to read for you guys, this is how we broke it down last year. Slater and Herbert were our only all-pro category players. Is there anybody looking at this list right now that stands out to you? I did bold some players I thought maybe we could talk about either we were like higher on than maybe expected or lower than expected. Granted, by the way, for everyone wondering and listening, this was last summer as well. So there's some uncertainty with rookies. There's some, expectations. We had no idea. Hey, maybe the line's going to take a step forward. Some guys did, some guys didn't. So what sticks out to you here?
I think us, and I'm pretty sure I pushed the Joshua Palmer hype more than anybody else last year. I still think when he was out there, the film and the statistics were very, very good. But there was a lot of projecting by me, put into solid starter with upside, I think. So that's probably one that I wish I would have handled maybe a little bit differently. People obviously are going to react to Bradley Bozeman and Trey Pipkins in the average starter range. I still feel okay about Pipkins being in there. Bozeman obviously has earned kind of a bit of a demotion, which we'll get into here in a minute, I think.
Yeah. So Palmer versus McConkey was kind of the thing there. I think for you and I was looking back on that episode, and we felt that only like one guy in this Greg Roman offense was going to be like that solid starter with upside. Like none of them Pro Bowl level, nobody all pro, no question about that. But one's going to be like the feature guy, maybe Palmer was that X or whatever, clearly the more targeted guy. We ended up going with the player that had been there and done that and had a rapport with Herbert. He just needed to stay healthy. Maybe Ben Herbert could do that. And it got worse. It was worse, unfortunately. So Palmer being there is a bummer. Part of the exercise that's difficult too is that sometimes you're in a tier by default. The next tier after average starter is rotation player, which Bradley Bozeman and Trey Pipkins were not last year for basically the entire season. But certainly not heading into it. So this year, there's a bit of a change to the tier. So like you could put a Bradley Bozeman or a Trey Pipkins in a lower tier than that between starter and rotation player. The one that cracks me up is honestly DJ Chark, that we both strongly had him as backup player.
Yeah.
And that was a take that we had all of last year. One, I'm actually surprised we did put him there, but that we got so much crap the entire offseason for that DJ Chark. Really, our discussion around him in general, it's classic offseason, right? Well, now you're with Herbert. Now you're with this team. Now you're with Harbaugh. Wow, they're going to take a step forward. Or now you're with Kellen Moore. Now you're with Joe Lombardi. Or now you're with, we've been there, done that with this thing, covering this team for now 6 years.
Yeah.
And we were not buying it whatsoever. And unfortunately, it actually looked like we were going to be completely wrong, which would have been awesome. And then we were just completely right after that. It was the strangest 180. But yes, I thought it was a little funny that we did put Chark in backup player.
Yeah, the Chark stuff was everybody was selling themselves on Chark becoming like a legitimate player for this team because of some Pro Bowl season he had in like 2019. I'm like, that was a long time ago, you guys. That one's funny. I think the running backs obviously flipped. We had J.K. Dobbins as rotation player, Gus Edwards as the average starter, which I think at the time is probably the right take, given the fact that Dobbins had not played a full season, basically ever, and the coaching staff was very high on Gus Edwards. Greg Roman at like every turn at this time last year was like, Gus, we like Gus, and so I think I feel okay about where we came to that logic or that conclusion with, but obviously it completely flipped on its head, and Gus Edwards was like a backup rotational back. He wasn't even a true rotation player based off of this. So J.K. Dobbins obviously became kind of a solid starter with upside. So he moved up a few tiers, I think. Yeah. So that was definitely, I think, the biggest flip is Dobbins moving up a couple tiers and Edwards probably moving down a couple tiers.
Yeah, I think it's almost like he should have been a rotation player with upside, because clearly there was upside for J.K. Dobbins, and we discussed that. But after so many injuries, we had no idea what they were going to get. They paid Gus Edwards a decent amount. They gave him a 2-year deal. Dobbins was a very low but incentives-laden deal. And Edwards was the talk of everything, right? Like you hear anybody for like all offseason into the regular season that we advocated for bringing in Edwards, not as the only back, but as one of the backs, because it worked with Roman before. In theory, the line could be better with Harbaugh. A lot of positivity on Edwards, Roman, the run game. Like the one thing they're going to do is get Gus Edwards to be a good, like average back and be like solid for the Chargers. Not an elite one. We knew that. Yeah. But at least an average one. And that one just did not work out. But good for Dobbins.
Yeah, very good for Dobbins. I think, if he had not gotten injured again, we would have been talking about one of the best running back seasons, I should say, that the Chargers have had in quite some time.
Yeah.
We all kind of figured that would be Edwards, having a potential, very close to 1,000 yard season, because he was the guy who was healthy and reliable, coming off the best season of his career. But there was that foot injury, and I just don't think he was ever really able to recover from that. And even when he was like quote unquote healthy, I was watching some of the games after he came back from the IR stint, and it was he just looked really slow, undecisive, like somebody who really did not trust himself. So unfortunate there for him. Hayden Hurst, I think we had a little bit maybe too much confidence in, although I think a lot of that was us kind of projecting that there was nobody really else that was going to take targets at the tight end position, and obviously became Disley by default. But we'll talk about this today in terms of Conklin and Gadsden. But those in those first 4 games, Hayden Hurst was playing like 35 snaps a game, and so they wanted a role for Hayden Hurst, and I think we had that part right. Again, injuries, just unable to get going with Justin Herbert, I think was the big one there for Mr. Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, very telling that, Justin Herbert will go to Quentin Johnson over and over again and would basically look off Hayden Hurst as almost a non-option for him. Like, that's very telling. I don't recall how open he actually was, but there was also a point last season, like before he got hurt, he had charted 0 wins in his run blocks last year. I'm pretty sure with Hurst. So it just did not work. I think average starter was fair. Him coming off of, was it the Panthers the previous year? Like, you're going to get 400 yards out of Hurst. That was a very easy buy. Some people had much higher than that, and I think you and I are a bit more on the conservative end. But average starter with Herbert makes sense, and it didn't materialize.
Yeah. Some other ones in here. Today, we're not going to talk a ton about, like this year's equivalent of like Cornelius Johnson and Max Duggan. But, obviously it's funny seeing those names that are not even on the roster anymore. Jordan McFadden, Brendan Hines, etc. Basically, everybody below Vidal is not on this roster outside of Haskins, who deserves a lot of credit for, we had no idea what the kind of special teams presence he would have. And then, I was rewatching a few of the games at the end of the season last year. There was some really positive moments for him as a rusher, as a receiver. Obviously, he had the one big receiving touchdown. So Haskins definitely exceeded expectations more than probably anybody else on this roster.
Yeah, he definitely did. I think he moved himself, especially towards the end of the year, like that Patriots game, the Broncos game, moved himself beyond what I saw from him in college, which is very much so. Granted, with Michigan, so it's kind of their style, but a straightforward plotter. Some of the receiving stuff, I think, was very unexpected.
Yeah, I agree there. Okay, before we get to the 2025 version, our audio audience is going to take a quick break, and then our visual audience is going to continue right along with our Chargers tiers. All right, so you sent out this template to some of our Discord members, some of your patrons, and things like that. So if you guys want to use this, let us know. You can use the link. We're definitely not going to like gatekeep this kind of link, but again, this is tiering the Chargers 2025 offense. Defense will be on Thursday. So should be some fun conversations with how players can kind of fit. Obviously, there's the Zion and Bradley Bozeman position switch thing and how that could impact things. So I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out today.
Yeah, curious to work through this with you and see how it goes. Yes, we do have the template. No, I don't believe every player on here is a roster bubble or backup player. It just helps with putting the photos on here already instead of having them way below, so we can see the entire screen. So you guys can see the entire screen. I don't have to go back and forth. Would you like to start with offensive line?
Because we can start there. Okay. I do want to clarify like how we have this sorted. So we have the S tier is all pro. The A tier is a Pro Bowl player. B is solid starter. C average starter. Below average starter, or what does that say?
Below average starter or involved rotation player. So like they're involved, but they're not a starter.
Yeah. So the all pro conversation, I think, is going to be like, kind of like the big hang up for a certain quarterback. We determined that this tier is essentially somebody that is always going to be in the all pro conversation, or at least should be. This is a top 3 or 4 player at their position. So it makes things a little bit more clear in how we can kind of outline things. Pro Bowl player is somebody who's top 8 in their position. Again, there's a little more wiggle room there, right? Because a Pro Bowl wide receiver, that could be like 10 guys, depending on that, and corner, edge rusher, etc. But a Pro Bowl player has a little bit more wiggle room. And this could be players who we think, could end up becoming that leap. That was our big thing with like Joshua Palmer last year, is we expected him to become that guy. But all pro, like, it really is somebody who should be considered, not just by us, by like how we view kind of like statistics, the film, how the media kind of represents that player. So all pro is we're trying to kind of make it a little bit more exclusive, because that's what all pro is. It's the most exclusive awards team of any kind of sport, really. It's very difficult to be considered a consistent all pro player.
Yeah, that one's very tricky depending on how you interpret it. To me, it's like you said, they are always a front runner to be an all pro, and every year they have been considered for all pro, or they've just been an all pro. This isn't just like, can they be an all pro this one offshoot year? Yes, we are talking about this year, but they are consistently in that category, in that discussion. So will be very interesting to see how we rank a couple of the guys at the top here for sure.
Okay, so you wanted to start with offensive line. Did you want to start with the easy ones, or do you want to start with maybe a little bit more interesting conversations?
We can start with the easy ones real quick, just to get through them. So we can start. I'm just looking left to right here. I think we're avoiding like Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson for now.
Sure.
Branson Taylor, backup player, so he'll stay here in this tier.
Yep.
Andre James technically is just a backup, and they have no intention so far of rotating him or putting him with the starting team. I'm fine with him staying here. Trey Pipkins is a backup. Jamari Sawyer is a backup. Any worry Jamari is a bubble player? I don't think so, but any consideration?
No, I don't think Jamari is a bubble player. He's apparently in fantastic shape. Jim Harbaugh says that he's lost 20 to 30 pounds, I think is the quote, which is great. Like, that's definitely needed for him. I actually do think we could put Trey Pipkins up a tier, because he is their main swing offensive lineman, and like, I do think he is a below average starter. I think it's fair to put Trey Pipkins in the D tier.
Okay, I see what you mean there, because he would be involved potentially in a few plays. Okay, I don't mind that. I think we always do this in between D and E. I'm fine. Like, if he starts, he's a below average starter. He might be involved in the rotation. That's fine. I
think, like, because he's probably the team's most, or the offense's most important non-quarterback backup player, I think D is probably fair for him.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Okay. So I think everybody listening is not going to be surprised. I think Rashawn Slater should be in the all-pro conversation. He received votes this last year. He was pretty close to, getting there. He's obviously a Pro Bowl player. Looking at some of the metrics on PFF and ESPN, PFF does the island win rate, which I think is one of the best metrics to look at. When it came to the amount of times that an offensive tackle was left one-on-one and how effective they were in preventing pressure, Rashawn Slater was right behind Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, and neck with Tristan Wirfs. So he's one of the best pass protecting offensive linemen in the leagues, regardless of position. When it comes to run blocking, I think he was really able to take a leap this past season, because he was not dealing with lower body injuries. And I think he was a true weapon. Like, if you watch some of the run blocking tape that Rashawn Slater has, he's able to just do things that not many offensive tackles are, from a cutoff standpoint, from an angle standpoint. Like, I was watching the other day, the Chargers were running power to the right side, and they had him reach a 3 technique, and it looked so easy. He just flipped his hips, boom, seal, over and done. He makes things like that are not easy look routine. And so for me, my expectation for Rashawn Slater is that he is in the all-pro conversation every year of his career. And I think that's fair for me to have him in this S tier category. Yeah,
I agree. It's going to be difficult, with Trent, with Lane, with Wirfs, etc. But yes, I agree that he's always in this conversation. Just out of curiosity too, with linemen, are we breaking it up by like left tackle, right tackle, or left guard, right guard? Because that changes the number of people in each pool, I guess. If we're talking about guard or
Sure.
tackle, or is it just like how did you determine that? Because like technically Slater might be like fourth in the all pro conversation, which is fine. I would still put him here. But like coming up with Mekhi Becton, for example, is he specifically being looked at as a right guard compared to right guards, or is he compared to just guards?
I mean, as far as I know, the all pro conversation does distinguish left guard versus right guard.
Okay.
Pro Bowl, I don't think matters. I don't think the Pro Bowl distinguishes that. So we can do left guard, right guard. I think that's fair.
Okay. Yeah, that more so. I do not think Mekhi Becton's an all pro player. Sorry. I don't think
No, I gotcha.
But I'm just curious for, especially when we get to like the 9 to 15 range, you know, if you're are you top 10 guard or you're top 10 right guard? It's two different things.
Yeah. So we can do Mekhi Becton now. I think he could potentially be like a Pro Bowl caliber player. Like he has the name recognition, and if the Chargers are, you know, sitting in kind of a top, you know, 5 offense, top 10 offense, they win a lot of games, etc. Greg Roman told him in practice recently, apparently he thinks that Mekhi Becton could be like a Hall of Fame player, which is extremely difficult for an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Especially he's not been great for the first 5 years of his career. But I think Mekhi Becton I would put in the solid starter range. His work as a run blocker is definitely carrying things there. As we've discussed, his pass protection is a little bit weaker than Chargers fans have acknowledged, but he's a legit weapon in the run game, and he's so strong. He's also like incredibly quick off the football for a guy his size. I think I would probably have him inside the top 8 at right guard by the end of the year at least. But right now, I think solid starter is probably a little bit more fair for Mekhi Becton.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's where I was going to have him. That's fine by me.
Yeah. Obviously, Joe Alt would be next. Where did you end up? Because I think we kind of agree about him and where he should be. But what was your thought process around Joe Alt?
Yeah, very tricky with Joe Alt. So the toughest thing for Joe Alt is that he's not Rashawn Slater. And so by that comparison, do I put him in all pro or do I not? That sort of thing. I think I could be convinced that someone would consider him, if we break it by left and right, to be in that all pro tier. Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh expect him to be an all pro. My bold prediction, he'd have the best right tackle season or the best offensive line season of anyone this year, and just kind of jump into that tier, pass Penei Sewell, that sort of thing, be the guy after Lane Johnson. I think comfortably, though, I would put him in Pro Bowl. That's my expectation for him. I think anything less is a complete, like, not a failure. That's mean, but given how high they drafted him, he kind of has to be that guy this year. Yeah. So I'm easily putting him in Pro Bowl. But if you feel strongly about all pro, I could put him there too.
So for what it's worth, the Pro Bowl roster carries 4 offensive tackles. Last year, all 4 AFC Pro Bowl tackles that made it were all left tackles. It was Rashawn, Deion Dawkins, Laremy Tunsil, and Ronnie Stanley. The tackles that made the NFC were Penei Sewell, Tristan Wirfs, Lane Johnson, and Taylor Decker. So they were split evenly between 2 left, 2 right.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of great right tackles in the AFC. Most of the good right tackles are in the NFC. So in terms of if you're stacking up pure right tackles, like Joe Alt to me is like easily very much in the conversation of best right tackle in the AFC. So I think it's comfortable to put him in the Pro Bowl in the Pro Bowl tier, because that should be the expectation. I think he has the potential to go higher on that list, but we've talked about this. The All Pro list is such a, you know, legacy driven award. Like the voters really like to see it happen for multiple years before they put you on that list from a generality standpoint, which makes what Rashawn Slater did as a rookie that much more impressive. So for me, I'm comfortable putting Joe Alt in the Pro Bowl conversation. To me, he's already a top 2 or 3 right tackle in the AFC. And I think by the end of the season, he should be in that conversation with Penei and with Lane as best right tackle in the league. And I think that is definitely a Pro Bowl conversation for me.
Yeah, no arguments there against that. So wherever Joe Alt is, where's the big dude? By the way, unfair that he gained 30 pounds and was wearing a white shirt today in his reaction to the jerseys, and he still looks like he's skinnier.
Oh, dude, he carries like, you can tell with like his shoulders are a little bit more firm and like his arms and things like that. But from an upper body standpoint, it does not look like he's gained 30 pounds at all. So I think, my like one nitpicking concern with Joe Alt from last season is, his when rushers could get into his chest a little bit, there were some anchor issues, and that was like the biggest problem with Daniil Hunter in the playoff game. So if the 30 pounds is, core strength, leg strength, it's gonna be curtains for everybody, all these rushers going against Joe Alt.
Yeah. So we think very highly of him. He'll have a great season, I think. But Pro Bowl seems like, Pro Bowl, whoopee. I think that's a very good consolation.
Yeah. FBS asking about the right tackles who are in his kind of conversation. Let me pull this up real quick on our lads. So there's a lot of the film community, like Brandon Thorne loves Spencer Brown. I think Spencer Brown is probably in that conversation right now. There's a lot of people who think like Amarius Mims could take that leap, but still obviously to be determined. JC Latham moving back to the right side, that could be a thing. We'll see what happens there, but again, to be determined. That's about it. That is about it. So Spencer Brown for sure is in that conversation. And then other guys are to be determined. Again, the right tackles in the AFC are much weaker. You're talking about Austin Jackson for the Dolphins, Morgan Moses for the Patriots, Armand Membu, which like he could be good for the Jets. Obviously, he was just drafted. Roger Rosengarten, Amaris Mims, Jack Conklin, who's played more than 12 games like once in his entire career. Currently projected to be Troy Fautano in Pittsburgh, Blake Fisher in Houston, which I like Blake Fisher. That's crazy to me that he's walking into right tackle right away. Braden Smith, Anton Harrison, again, JC Latham, Mike McGlinchey, Jawan Taylor, just like absolutely not. DJ Glaze, and that's it. So it's Joe Alt has a chance to be comfortably the best right tackle in the league very quickly. And I think that's very much in the realm of possibilities after the season.
Yeah, I agree.
Dylan Cole, so he's not 360 pounds. So he was technically listed at 320. But I don't think he actually played at 320. I think that was more around like 305, 310 maybe. So Greg Roman says that he's gained 30 pounds, which is probably more like 20. So he's 330 pounds walking around right now is what we have been kind of made to us. So how much exactly is 20 pounds, 30 pounds, whatever? He's 330 pounds of, more rocked up roadman strength. So they say, I think he played more like 310 right now, or for last season, I should say.
Yeah, not 360. Becton is probably 360.
Becton is probably comfortably 360. That man is a large human being. Did you see the picture of him like standing next to Trey Pipkins?
Yeah, it looks like he's tiny.
Yeah, Trey Pipkins is like a large human, and Kai Becton just dwarfed him. It's crazy to me how big the right side of the offensive line is for this team.
Yep, fun stuff.
Where do you want to go next here?
I think Bradley Bozeman's easier for me personally. So obviously the discussion here is he a left guard? Is he a center? I'm still going to assume he's a center until they switch. As you pointed out earlier, our lads does list Zion as a center. I'm indifferent to it. Like, it doesn't change it for me. I do not think Bradley Bozeman is an average starter right now. I do believe he's a below average starter, which would put him in like that back quarter-ish, back third of the league. And I think that's fair regardless of where he plays. I feel that way if he plays center, and with more uncertainty at left guard, I still feel strongly about that.
Yeah, I think you and I messaged about this the other day, but the center position is not in a great state right now around the league. There's a lot of very talented young players, but after the retirements of, Jason Kelce was replaced by a very good center, but Jason Kelce was obviously the best center of our lifetime. Frank Ragnow, we'll see what happens, what the Detroit Lions do. There's Creed Humphrey, and there's like Eric McCoy, and that's like about it, man. Like, the center position is in a very bad spot when it comes to league standing. So hypothetically speaking, I think if you want to be nicer towards Bradley Bozeman, I think like the overall lack of proven average centers, you could make an argument for him to be in that conversation.
Yeah.
Tyler Linderbaum, that's a great call, Dylan. I forgot about
Mhm.
Tyler Linderbaum for a second there. He's fantastic as well. So if you want to be nicer, I wouldn't hate like hearing an argument for Bozeman as an average starter, given his durability and his run blocking and stuff like that. But the communication issues, the lack of athletic traits, I think really showed up
Right.
last year.
Yeah.
The overall just miscues in pass protection. I think to me, he's very clearly a below average starter
Mhm.
at center. And I think at guard, that's even more so because particularly at left guard, there's some dudes around the NFL. And so I think Bozeman is pretty
Fair.
firmly in the below average category. But if you wanted to be nicer to him at center, I think you could make an argument that he is an average starter just given where that position is right now.
Yeah, I think you pointing out the traits is exactly where my differing here is between distinction between him and like Zion Johnson. There's just a clear athletic, like no matter what you think of Zion Johnson, you can acknowledge that Zion Johnson is far more athletic. That showed up on film, that shows up in the RAS, you name it. So if I'm separating those two into different tiers, like that will drop Bozeman down behind Zion in those tiers.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
So do you put Zion in average starter?
I am gonna say yes for Zion being an average starter. I know the fan base again is not very happy about him being just walking into a starting position, but he did carry one of the highest run blocking grades in the league at left guard last year. The dude is an absolute weapon in that regard. One-on-one pass protection, I think he's very, very solid. It's literally just the stunts. Like the stunts happen so frequently that they are always misconstrued. And so when you're talking about an average starter, I think Zion is comfortably in that range because he's not like a complete liability overall.
Right.
It's just like one particular area just really gives him such a tough time. So I think average starter is fine. And if he is a center, I think that's even more solidified to me again, because just the position is so weak. Daniel Popper, for what it's worth, was saying on his live stream last week that he believes that the team wants Zion to be the center. And they want Zion to win that position battle. If he does, I think he's very firmly an average starter at center, even projecting a little bit just because of his traits and his run blocking. But I can understand that maybe at guard, you probably have to squint a bit to really put him at average starter.
Yeah, I agree. Jim Harbaugh loves Zion Johnson. At this point, I'm convinced like they want him to win it and they want him to come back next year to show like to reward the development if there's any. Hopefully there is. Harbaugh talks about Zion like the second most, I feel like, after Herbert sometimes. Every single press conference, media, whatever, he's always talking about Zion. They've got, categories for him, and he works out the most. He's so smart. He's this, and that.
So strong, so athletic.
Yes. I mean, goodness gracious. Which, yes, he is strong. He is athletic. He does work hard. Like, those things are absolutely true. So I think him being here is, I agree with this. I'm curious if anybody disagrees. I think most would at least have Zion ahead of Bozeman in some tier, no matter where you put them in tiers.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm comfortable with this. I wasn't sure where you'd have Zion, but I think this is fine. I think what he does in the run game is what carries him here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, average starter, like he's probably closer. We have 16 to 24 on this category. He's probably closer to 24.
Yes.
But I think he's much closer to 24 than he is to like 32, 36, whatever you want to go for after that.
Yeah, I agree there.
Okay, should we do the tight ends next?
Yeah, let's do tight ends. That sounds fun.
So Will Dissly can't be a Pro Bowl player.
How dare you?
He's very firmly a solid starter for me. Given what his floor is overall as a player, like he's one of the 4 or 5 best blocking tight ends in the league. Just such a weapon in that regard. And if his worst case scenario is as a pass catcher, he can jump in and give you a 500-yard season. Yeah, that's a pretty good player, man. So I'm very comfortable putting Will Dissly as a solid starter here.
Yeah, by doing more than expected, he got a demotion in our rankings technically from last year because we had solid starter with upset, and we felt that was the case with Disley.
Yeah.
But he's, yes, very much so a solid starter. I think there's zero questions about that. I think towards like the last game of the year after that playoff loss, there's a lot of Will Disley discussion, and I get it. Things are frustrating. I get it. He was not brought in to be a pass catching tight end. It's a miracle he was as productive as he was, overachieving so often. At one point, he was like first in yards per route run. Like that's insane for someone who just should not be doing that. So solid starter is an easy one for me.
Yeah, he was like first in yards per route run, and he was like third in yak. Like it was crazy. This is a good point from Dylan. We got the blocker of the year award for offensive lineman. I would love to see some recognition for blocking tight ends. You know, like Virgil Green to me just screams like somebody that should have been more recognized for like his blocking potential, or Sean McGrath or whatever. You know, there's a lot of great blocking tight ends, Josh Oliver, etc. You know, I want to see like a blocking tight end award. I think that's needed.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Like a fullback tight end kind of award, differentiated from a lineman. Yeah, that'd be cool.
What did you make of Tyler Conklin? Obviously going a little bit viral yesterday for his workout and his routes, and people were like making fun of him, but the dude is absolutely somebody who can route linebackers and safeties up. That's proven for him. So where did you end up with Tyler Conklin?
Very tricky, but kind of like Zion in the back range of that tier. But I kind of feel him as more of a solid starter than I do an average starter. I believe in him more than I did Hurst last year, and Hurst was average starter. I just think the floor with Conklin is so much higher. The hands are there. I just think I think he's a solid starter, but not in the top 10 variety, more in like your 15, like maybe the last guy. But I kind of like him there more than like 16 to 24.
Yeah, obviously we've talked about last season was not great for him with the connection or lack thereof with him and Aaron Rodgers, but the previous 2 seasons he was very comfortably like in the top 12-ish in terms of yards per route run, yak per reception, ESPN's open score. Now I feel pretty confident that the Chargers will get that version of Tyler Conklin, and they haven't had a tight end truly able to run like choice routes in a while, and I think Tyler Conklin can give you that kind of floor. So I'm okay putting him in the solid starter range, just because I think that you know, again, maybe there's a little projection here, but this is a guy who had 600 yards with Zach Wilson and like no receiver 2 with the Jets to take attention away from him, and he had 600 yards. So I think in this offense that features tight ends so heavily with this quarterback, they have to get on the right page, right? Because a lot of their stuff is going to be like timing routes. But I think this is definitely a situation where Tyler Conklin can come in and be a solid starting pass catching tight end one.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a bet, and we kind of made that bet last year with Hurst. Actually, no, I disagree. We didn't love Hurst a ton, but I just feel like with him,
right?
I don't know. I kind of feel like he can. Where the heck is he on this chart? There he is.
Yeah, a lot of the Hurst stuff was just like, well, they don't have anybody else.
Correct.
But he had like 250 yards for the Falcons the year prior. It was a lot of just like, this is the role. Like he's going to get the volume. Whereas Conklin is, I think, a firm upgrade in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Okay. I was not sure where we go with that, but I'm all for it.
Is Gadsden on here?
He is. He is.
Is he the one at the far?
He's this guy right here. He's this guy. I'll put Gadsden.
Okay.
I'll just put him there for now, but we can talk
about below average starter feels so mean. I know that's just like where you have to put him, right? Like, but he's not a starter. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I put him there on complete accident, but that's where I would have him. No knock against him, but he's not a starter. We already have 2 starters as it is right now, and they're solid starters. I think
he's not a roster bubble player.
He's definitely not a roster bubble player. And this is someone who will work towards being at least an average starter, but he's not even tight end 2 right now. So I think that he kind of has to be an involved rotation player that we feel really good about, but just not there yet.
Yeah, as Dylan points out, we have or involved rotation player there as well. So
correct.
I think if we had like involved rotation player with upside, that's where we could put him. There's only so many tiers, so I think if like it feels mean, but it's his role until we see otherwise. So
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And I think you can put Tucker Fisk there as well, given his ability as a blocker. I think he's going to be very involved. So I don't think that needs a ton of discussion. I mean, he had probably like the best catch of the playoff game, which is super weird to look back at that. There was that like wheel route up the left side. It was hilarious, but the dude is an absolute machine as a run blocker. I loved watching him run block. So I think that's fair for him as well.
Yeah. We can do Scott Matlock here as well. Unless you want to wait for him for running backs.
You can put him in the below average starter category as well.
Yeah. I mean,
there's only like 8 starting
fullbacks in the NFL. Technically, he's an all-pro candidate because there's like 5 of them.
He did get Pro Bowl votes.
No shit, he almost did. Made it. You're right. I don't know. Average starter? I don't know where to put Matlock because he might play 6 snaps.
Let's see who took more snaps, positions. Let's go.
Yeah, I can make a Scott Matlock tier.
Yeah, probably should, honestly.
Okay, how do I do that? Can I do this while I'm here? Let's see. Oh no, that's my own tier. Add row below. Fullback tier. This is a Matlock tier.
How do I sort? Like, I just want.
We'll do got this blue for. Is this purple? Is this blue? I don't know. All right, let's do it. All right. Oh, what happened here? Go away. Delete row. Okay. I made a Scott Matlock tier. It doesn't mean he's bad.
Nice job.
I just don't know what to do with him. So there's a Scott Matlock tier, everybody. There he is. Here we go.
Dude, he played 361 snaps of offense for the Chargers last year.
Good gracious.
That's a ton.
Yeah. Well, someone's got to run a vertical route in their end zone. So.
Yeah, man, there's just like there's not many fullbacks. Like there's really just not a lot of fullbacks out there these days.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to quantify or to rank him in any way. So I think he'll be good. How many receiving? 52. No. Yeah, 52 non-pass blocking snaps. So routes.
Yeah. So the Bills and the Dolphins have a fullback. There's Reggie Gilliam in Buffalo, Alec Ingold in Miami, Patrick Ricard, obviously, Michael Burton in Denver. Our Lads has technically Carson Steele as a fullback, but he's not a fullback.
Didn't he get Pro Bowl votes?
He did. I think he actually was the Pro Bowl fullback.
Oh man.
Matlock, and then there's Hunter Lepke, I think. CJ Ham, Kyle Juszczyk. So there's 9. There's 9 fullbacks on rosters right now in the NFL.
Okay. Well, Matlock, you've got your own tier, buddy. And it's not bad. He's down there, not because I think he's worse than, I don't know, Raheem Sanders.
Not automatically bad.
Gotta let everybody know. Yes, not automatically bad.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let's move to running backs.
Okay.
Where did you have Najee Harris?
Very good question. If you look at like the numbers from this past year and kind of previous years on a, rushing yards total basis, on a per play basis, he's like that fringe, kind of like we're talking with Conklin, between like that 15 to 20-ish or so. There's not really a number I can point out where it's like, wow, that's like top 5 right there. He's not like top 5 after contact and top 5 in yak or something. There's not a specific thing where I can go, that's it. And I apologize to anyone who does the whole 1,000 yards thing, but to me, like that specific thing is like, yes, he was always rushed for 1,000 yards. That's awesome. That's a pure like attempts and volumes based thing. That's like really cool. But if I go to the NFL and I get 500 carries and I rush for 1,000 yards, that is, well, 1, that's impressive. Thank God I held up after 500 carries. But 2, like I don't think that's just, you got a lot of attempts. The 1,000 yards for Najee is you got lots of attempts award. So I don't really love that argument for Najee Harris. His durability is great, but I don't think that's like an awesome argument. I have him in solid starter because I think the shift towards a more gap scheme approach will help him. I'm hoping the Chargers offensive line is better. Pittsburgh's interior in general was better. Their tackles, not so much. Now you get better tackles. Hopefully an improved interior in terms of the Chargers taking a step forward.
Sure.
But I think he's a solid starter, but I also wouldn't rule out putting Hampton right next to him either.
Yeah. I think below average starter is inaccurate for Najee Harris. Like I think saying that there's 25 running backs better than him is probably not true. But I think that he's probably in the 18 to 24 range more so than like top 15. I think in this offense, if the Chargers just had Najee, Vidal, and Hassan Haskins, I think Najee could comfortably run for like 1,200 yards in this offense. I just think like the fit is much better. The volume's going to be there. It's just a lack of explosive plays that's like keeping me from really like definitely putting him in the solid starter range.
Yeah.
But I definitely, again, just like the role of the offense, I think could put him in there.
Yeah.
There's also the aspect of things like him and Omarion, I think, are going to like be a true 50-50 split.
Yeah.
So is he really like truly a starter? I think is maybe up for grabs a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think putting him and Omarion in the average starter range just feels more appropriate to me at this point in time. Obviously, if there were like with upside tab, then I would put Omarion there. But I do think Najee as an average starter feels appropriate to me.
I'm totally fine with that. Omarion was really where I had the trickiest time figuring it out because you drafted him in the first round. Granted, not a top 5, player like Joe Alt, but you did draft him very early. Where's the running backs? Like, where are running backs going to be this year overall? Are there going to be 15 better running backs? But like on a per play basis, it is very like explosiveness, receiving, whatever you want to call it. Like you could easily put Hampton in a solid starter category on a per play basis, but is the volume going to be there? Like you mentioned with him, with Najee Harris. So I could see if a Chargers fan was like, hey, I'm going to look at these players on a per play basis. I think Hampton, isn't going to be the RB1 right now, but he's going to play great football and he plays like a solid starter. I get that. But is he officially? I don't know. If I had to pick between the two, I would put Hampton over Najee Harris. I think by the end of the year, we are seeing Hampton as a solid starter. So if I were going to make an argument for Hampton, it's that maybe not right now, but anticipating where he's going to be by the end of the year, I think he is that starter and he is a solid starter. So if you want to break up these two, that's how I'd do it. But I'm also fine putting them both here. To me, it's also just he was a first round pick. So I think like
eventually the split is going to be more towards him. I think that's fair. We've talked about this. They took things very slowly with Ladd, and I think they won't be that deliberate with Omarion. Like he's going to touch the football, but like already just like projecting forward to 2026, like Omarion with this line, and maybe they figure out, kind of maybe they be aggressive. They go get like a top tier left guard free agent or something like that. They go get another receiving, option to take pressure off. I think Omarion and his ceiling is like easily like 1,400 yards rushing in 2026. Like I think you could really get that high. So let's put him in solid starter then. I think if we're projecting a little bit here to more towards his ceiling, I'm okay with putting him in the solid starter range.
Yeah. So kind of similar range-ish, like Jahmyr Gibbs had, where was it? 945 yards rushing his rookie season. Yeah. And I think that's like, that'd be a win. That'd be a huge win for Hampton. But I like him in solid starter. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Let's bump him up then.
Now I feel like we're slightly overrating the Chargers offense, but maybe that changes when we get to receivers.
Yeah, obviously that's some of it is role projected, right? Like Will Dissly's not a great tight end overall, but his role is very specific.
We have to do.
How do you want to sort Haskins and Vidal, and I guess Rocket Sanders as well?
Yeah, I think. Okay, so I think Haskins is a lock to make it. Whether he's a 3 or the 4, I think he's a lock to make it. I just think he was too involved down the stretch. They obviously like brought him in. He's a Harbaugh guy, Michigan guy. I think it's a pretty easy like. Is he an involved rotation player? Like how much is the third running back going to even touch the football with these two? That's kind of my hang up, because it was exclusively Edwards, Dobbins, and like did they even have an active third back? Was it Haskins? Did he even touch the football? It was
Haskins. So Haskins had 34 carries. Kamani Vidal had 43.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that was obviously because Gus was injured.
Yeah.
Vidal had 5 receptions. Haskins had 3. So Vidal did touch the football more than Haskins last year, but again, he was more consistently active than Haskins was. So the role on offense is not going to be a ton. Like I truly think that as long as Harris and Hampton are healthy, they're going to take 90% of the snaps, maybe 95. Like I think it's their workload. But I think Haskins and Vidal, I think Haskins has to be in the involved rotation player category, just because he's going to be on the roster. Mm-hmm. The question is, for the bigger question, I think for me is Vidal versus Rocket Sanders, how we classify them. But I think Haskins, like by default, has to be in the involved rotation player category.
Okay, so let's put Haskins. I think this is Haskins here. Involves less rotation. Yeah, how much? Yep. I don't know. Let's say it's even just third down. Occasionally, they did like him as a fullback kind of dive guy. We'll see if that changes with Harris and Hampton. Probably will.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna sneeze. You think about Vidal and the other guy.
I again, if we're kind of projecting their role more so than their actual ability here, I think having Vidal and Rocket Sanders both in the roster bubble category is probably fair, because I think there is a very reasonable chance that Rocket makes it over Vidal. I think vice versa is true. Greg Roman said that Vidal's had a great camp, great offseason, looks to be in good shape. Obviously, the biggest thing for him is pass protection and special teams. If he can play more on special teams, then I think he's very firmly your RB3, just because I think he has that kind of ceiling. They drafted him. They did not draft Rocket Sanders, even though they really like him. But because Sanders and Vidal spot on the 53 are both in jeopardy, I think leaving them in the roster bubble category is probably the most fair argument there.
Yeah, that's fine by me. That's roster bubble. Yep, that works for me.
And again, you can think whatever you want about Rocket Sanders. They did not draft him. They very easily could have drafted him if they really wanted to. They gave him the most money of any undrafted free agent, but they drafted Kamani. They did not draft Rocket, and they're very different running back classes. But if they really truly wanted Rocket that badly, they very easily could have drafted him. They drafted Kamani. They did not draft Rocket.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, neither can be higher, but I think both here is fine.
Yeah. Okay, our audio audience is going to take one more quick break. We're at 54 minutes here, which is classic us, but we're going to continue right after this. Okay, so we have receivers and quarterbacks left. Where do you want to start with the wide receivers?
I think work our way up. Let's go with maybe some of last year's players, like Brendan Rice, and then kind of work your way towards maybe some of the new guys this year. Obviously Jalen Reagor's in there as well. So for me, like Brendan Rice, another player we thought was a fine draft pick, but there's a lot of hype around him. I think now everyone's kind of at the point where we know he's a roster bubble player. I think he's even a practice squad candidate at this point.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where he ends up.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to see them keeping 7 on the 53 again. Last year they didn't really have a choice because TJ Chark was injured, Palmer was injured. It was kind of like we can't really afford not to keep Simi and Brendan on the active roster. This year, I think it's going to be 6. Brendan Rice is going to have to take a sizable leap forward to make this roster ahead of Keandre Lambert-Smith, or give you some returner ability to make it over Darius Davis. But I think he's even behind Jalen Reagor at this point. This coaching staff loves Jalen Reagor. Every time they talk about the receivers, they always bring up Jalen Reagor. But I still would have him in the roster bubble category because, again, like if he's not your main returner, it's so difficult to project him on the roster. So those two, I think, are very comfortably in the roster bubble category.
Those two, by those you mean Rice and Reagor?
Yes.
I think I agree. So I'm trying to figure out who's the involved rotation player here. You could argue that's Mike Williams, depending on what happens, because he's not really popping right now. But I think he'll have a much bigger role than that. So is that Davis potentially in the below average starter involved rotation player tier?
Yeah, I would put Davis and Mike Williams in the involved rotation player role.
Okay.
I think Williams is probably more like the below average starter category.
Yeah.
I think he is a fine signing. I understand why the Chargers brought him back. I'm very happy with him being able to mentor Trey Harris and all that stuff. The numbers and the film from last year with the Jets are not pretty, and neither was it with the Steelers. I hope Mike Williams can improve from this category, but there's nothing for me to really justify putting him higher because last year was truly like he was 4th to last in open score when he had traditionally been like in the middle of the pack. And so it was bad last year. I don't think it will be as bad, but Mike has to prove it, I think, a little bit before we can move him up a little bit more.
Yeah. And this is the toughest one because, as you mentioned at the top of the show in this discussion, there's so many receivers right now that if you like average starter, but we have it as 16 to 24, you look at the list of the top 30 receivers. Like there are so many good receivers. So there's sort of like a scale or different kind of way of ranking these players that like we maybe like them more than like saying they're a below average starter. But yeah, it's very, very difficult for me to like think, okay, like is Mike Williams below average? Like, okay, maybe he's not. Is he an average starter? Is he top 25? Oh, never mind. Nope. Okay, I got to put him back down. So I think here is just fine.
Yeah. So the other receivers, I think Keandre Lambert-Smith, we can put. I don't know, man. That one's a little tricky to me. Like
he's pure backup for me right now.
Yeah, he has not practiced like all spring. Like he's going to be behind. So I think that one's a little tricky for me. If he's healthy and if he has a great camp, I think he could move up a tier here. But I think pure backup is probably safe. Like he's probably, the fan base wants him to be a starter and want him to play, but he's probably a guy who's a healthy scratch on game days.
Yeah.
So he's not on the. I think he's on the opposite side of the bubble, but I think he could. Like I think there is a world where he doesn't make the roster. Like if he continues to struggle with injury, etc., I could see a world where Reagor jumps him. Honestly, I could.
I mean, that's currently the case, so that's easy to project there for sure. Now, I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is safe, but I think he's right now a little sort of. I think he's drafted early enough where he's a lock to make the roster, but I don't think he's active on game day. If he played a game tomorrow, I think that's Jalen Reagor. Well, obviously, Lambert-Smith is also hurt. So it could be anybody else, but yeah, he's right now behind Jalen Reagor on the depth chart, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, Kevin Kernick says that he could be this year's Justin Eboigbe. I think that's very possible. Very possible.
Yeah, definitely very possible there. So he's there, Reagor's there. Okay, we have all the receivers except for Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris. Which one do you want to go with first?
I think Quentin. I think it's going to seem a little mean, but I think he's probably a below average starter at this point in time. Matt Harmon did a wonderful write-up of him and kind of highlighted, the usage was definitely, more favorable in 2024 than it was in 2023. The Chargers under Greg Roman were definitely more accessible to his yak potential, and I think that will continue. But they still had him running a very high amount of go balls, which should not be the case. So I'm very curious to see what his role is. I think I would love to put him in the average starter category, but I just think we need to see a little bit more and see him really elevate over Trey Harris. So for now, I think below average starter is probably the most fair for Quentin.
Yeah, that's ultimately where I placed him before we even did this exercise. Yes, you can start more than one receiver, more than two receivers on the field. So sure, like as an involved part, yeah, I could see him, as a wide receiver 3, a very good wide receiver 3 with some wide receiver 2 upside, but definitely not a wide receiver 1 right now. So I think this is totally fine. I cannot put Quentin Johnson as a top 25 receiver. I think this is very fair. No, he's not a cut candidate. He's not a pure backup. He's not a bubble guy. Stop trying to trade Quentin Johnston, for the love of God. He's a good wide receiver 3. And unfortunately, not a good wide receiver 1 or 2, but a good wide receiver 3 will keep you on the roster.
So if he's a good wide receiver 3, where are we putting Trey Harris? Because I think the ceiling for Trey Harris is definitely to move up into the average starter category.
Yeah.
I just question, really, does that happen in 2025, or is that more of a 2026 thing for Trey Harris? Given, again, there's a lot of bodies in here. You're sharing targets and snaps with Mike Williams at the X, sharing targets and snaps with Quentin at the Z.
Yeah.
Is he really going to move into the slot all that much? I think Trey Harris, his ceiling is higher right now than the other players, but I don't know if I like calling him in below average starter it feels mean, because I don't feel that way about him. But I do kind of think we have to see it first.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, the receiver position makes it almost automatic at this point. Again, is Trey Harris a top 25 receiver? No, he is not. I would not have said that about Ladd McConkey last year, as much as I loved him and I love Trey Harris. But this is, this is not how we feel about this player overall and their whole career, that we think he's always going to be where he is. As you said, of all the guys in this grouping, like if you're looking at Bozeman, other than maybe Gadsden, and I personally would say more than Gadsden, Trey Harris is the highest ceiling. He can move up higher and higher and higher next year. We'll look back on this last year and go, ha ha ha, Trey Harris is a below average starter. Ridiculous. I hope so. But this is where he fits right now. As much as I love him, I cannot say he is an average starter. Technically, he's not even starting in training camp right now.
Yeah, I think that is right. I think that makes sense.
Cool. So Ladd McConkey is the last one we have not talked about. I'm not putting him in below average starter. So I do not think he's an average starter. I think he's at minimum a solid starter. Where are you kind of feeling with Ladd McConkey here? Because this is Matt, you talk about the opposite of Quentin Johnson's charting with Harmon.
There's a lot more green on Ladd McConkey's chart.
Harmon thinks he's a special wide receiver 1 kind of player. And I personally, with all the training wheels off with Ladd McConkey, I actually do think he's a Pro Bowl contender.
Yeah.
But it's a stacked position.
Harmon's not the only one. Josh Norris and Hayden Winks do a great job for Underdog Sports. They watched all of the rookie players, and both of them felt like Ladd was the best one on tape last year. Just more consistent overall of all of the rookie receivers. Just going through some of the numbers in just the regular season, he finished 9th in the league in receiving yards. He was tied for 15th in yak per reception. He was 8th in yards per route run. Like, this is a guy who was very high in missed tackles forced. He was 12th. He was 13th in first downs created. He was 3rd in passer rating when targeted. Like, he's top 10 in like all of these metrics. And so again, the receiver position is so difficult, but if we're really just saying like he's at worst in the conversation, I think he's definitely somebody that should be in the A category, because I think there's a very real chance that he plays in that game, right? Especially given like players who opt out and things like that. I firmly expect him to improve from last season, and I think the Chargers will be a little bit more comfortable with his role. I think Pro Bowl category is very fair for Ladd, because I think there's enough respect for him from a film community standpoint. The numbers are all there.
Yeah.
Him and Justin are very much like on the same page. They're not at the buddy ball level that him and Keenan were at quite yet, but
Mhm.
there was some fuck it lads out there somewhere energy
Oh,
at the end of the season that Herbert was having, and I think Lad just was consistently in the right places. The buzz in the locker room is that Lad has really kind of ascended from a leadership standpoint, which is great. The offense needs more of that. So I think it's very fair to put him in this conversation in a Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Obviously, is he top 8 overall in the entire league? Maybe not, but is he a AFC top wide receiver? I think absolutely that is the case. I think he was borderline top 8 in the AFC last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no problem putting him here. Like at minimum, like based on his rookie season, he finished as a solid starter. So I think going into this year, I think Pro Bowl is completely fair.
Yeah, I agree there. Okay. Our last player is our title player, which is Justin Herbert. The Yahoo Sports guys did all of their rankings there. This week, most of them had Herbert as the 5th rated quarterback. That kind of feels like where he is in at least the film watching community. Nick Wright and that crew of FS1 were like vehemently against him being even in like the top 8. There's such a wins culture among national media that drives me nuts. So for you, where did you end up with roster goal? Yeah. Where did you end up with Justin Herbert? Do you think he makes the all pro leap this year, or do you think he's more in the Pro Bowl category?
So at minimum, I think he's in the Pro Bowl category. The question is he an all pro or not? That was my hang up. And ultimately, I'm going to keep him in the Pro Bowl category. Not that he will not play like a top 3 quarterback at times. I just think right now you can TBD, like you can make an argument for him over Burrow. I get that. I just think there is kind of a locked in 4 right now that deserve to be there based on their play. And that's not that Herbert is not, can't be one of those guys. I just think they're a bit firmly entrenched there right now, barring awful, horrendous play this year, which I don't expect. So I would have Herbert, like if I was ranking quarterbacks, I might have Herbert 5th. But is that someone who's in that all pro, like significantly, like always? And that's kind of going back to the original conversation, is this player's always in that and always gets votes for this, and maybe has been in the all pro tier before and repeatedly in that tier. And I just don't think that's the case. And even looking at this group, I mean, we put Herbert's got Ladd McConkey, who rocks. But his receivers after that, we put in as below average starter, below average starter, below average starter. Part of that feels mean, sure. But that's kind of what he's working with. We did put his running backs a little bit higher in solid or average starter. And I think they're going to run quite a bit this year too, as expected. So I don't know if he'll ever really even have the numbers to be in that all pro category, fair or not. Like Burrow could throw, 5,000 yards and lose, every one of his games but 3. But I just don't know if Herbert's going to have that volume either to get those votes anyway. Herbert might be by like EPA be a better quarterback, maybe some per play stats, but I don't know, man. And the line has to help him. He has to improve his pressure to sack rate, which really dropped last year dramatically. That was unfortunate. It's not that he has no pocket presence like some people say, but it just wasn't as good as it usually is. So I think that while he's the most valuable player on the team, I do think he belongs in Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the thing that's difficult for Herbert in this conversation is that Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson just feel so cemented. And then there are like some people who feel like Burrow is in his own tier after that. And then it's Herbert and Stafford and other guys. So it's so difficult to put him in the all pro conversation. Could he be an all pro in 2025? Absolutely. Could he be one in 2026? Absolutely. The Chargers have to help him out in that regard, right? Like they have to win some games, but probably win the division. So is there that potential? Yes, but I think also like the media cannot stop talking about Jaden Daniels, right? Like, so Jaden Daniels, from a media perspective, if he takes the Commanders to multiple playoff wins again, he's probably going to be an all pro as well, just because like he's become this instant winner in the NFC, which is so difficult. Dak Prescott has been an all pro guy previously. Jalen Hurts has had some buzz in that regard. So Is it possible? Yes. Is he absolutely cemented in that tier? Unfortunately, not. Like the Chargers have to win some more games. And I think also he has to stay healthy, right? Like I think the
100%.
biggest way for him to make that leap outside of winning is that he stays healthy.
Mm-hmm.
He starts using his legs more often, and that can really help elevate him because he's he's a very capable runner. But nowadays, Lamar and Burrow, or not, excuse me, not Burrow. Burrow doesn't run that much, but Lamar and Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels and these guys, they get such a boost with their legs that it's tough for the other guys to get in there. So unfortunately, I just think like the ceiling is a bit capped at like the fourth best quarterback in the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just given where, I mean, we're talking about multiple MVPs for Lamar, multiple MVPs for Mahomes. Allen just won the MVP. These guys are just consistently in that conversation. So I think just by default, unfortunately, he's in that Pro Bowl kind of tier right now.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Wish he'd be higher up. I just don't even know if this is even the offense and the coordinator to get him to there. Which, by the way, I do have on here both Greg Roman and a Chargers logo in case we wanted to tier where we think Roman is at this point and will be, or the Chargers' offense is at this point and will be.
Oh, man. Off the top of my head, if we wanted to do play caller rankings,
yep,
I think like best case scenario for Greg Roman is that he's an average play caller.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many play callers who are doing great things right now. Like Liam Cohen, what he did in Tampa Bay last year, obviously Ben Johnson, but he's, those two guys are two head coaches right now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say best case he's an average starter. I think below average is probably not right because like the offense was, top 15 in EPA per play. They were 12th in DVOA last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say average for
I
Greg
agree.
Roman.
That's what I was thinking as well. Can he jump maybe a little bit higher? I really don't even know. I think the offense will always be better than Roman the play caller, which seems kind of mean.
Yes.
He's calling the plays that might make the offense good. But I think we all can acknowledge that the offense is Herbert, and Herbert can do more than what's called. And I think that's what makes the offense better. So to me, I think the offense can be in the 9 to 15 tier.
Yes. The ceiling of the offense, I think, is definitely in the solid range because Herbert, Ladd, the two tackles, like they have better players this year. And I think the run game should be better. So I think the ceiling is solid for the offense. I don't think they're the 24th best offense. I would probably have them in like the 14 to 18 range.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair given like how many younger players they're going to be relying on.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's average.
Okay, we can put them average. That's fine.
but I do agree. I think the ceiling is higher there. Yeah, I don't think it'll be in the top 10, but I think they could be very easily be like 13th or 14th.
Yeah, if they're in solid, they're 14th or 15th. If they're in average, they're 16th or 17th. I really just want to think they're right. Yeah, average. I guess that really is truly average.
Yep. All right. Any final thoughts on this exercise, Tyler? Before we didn't really talk about Taylor Heineke or Trey Lance for anybody wondering, but they're obviously in the backup category.
Yeah, I need to move Steve Klotz up to All Pro. Otherwise, I think we're good.
I couldn't figure out who that was down there. There's a lot of love for Steve Klotz out on social media. But just a quick recap, I guess, for our audio audience. We have Rashawn Slater as the only Charger in the All Pro category. Last year we only had Justin Herbert in the Pro Bowl category. This year we also have Joe Alton, Ladd McConkey. So that's definitely a big improvement from last year. Solid starter category, we have Mekhi Becton, Will Dissly, Tyler Conklin, and Amarian Hampton. Average starter, we have Zion Johnson, Najee Harris, Greg Roman, and the offense as a whole. And then below average starter / involved rotation player, we have Trey Pipkins, Bradley Bozeman, Aronde Gadsden, Tucker Fisk, Hassan Haskins, Mike Williams, Darius Davis, Quentin Johnson, and Trey Harris. These are not ranked in order, by the way. And then roster bubble or pure backup, we have Keandre Lambert-Smith, Jalen Reagor, Branson Taylor, Taylor Heineke, Andre James, Jamari Sawyer, Kamani Vidal, Brendan Rice, Trey Lance, Rocket Sanders, Steve O'Klotz. And then we put Scott Matlock in his own tier because we don't really know what to do with him. There's only like 9 fullbacks in the league, so he gets his own tier. Would love to see him get some Pro Bowl hype this year. That'd be fantastic if he took that league forward, but right now it's kind of tough to put him and sort him in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he sees himself as a Pro Bowl D tackle. Maybe next episode we put him in that category. Who knows? Find out on Thursday.
Scott, if you want to be a Pro Bowl player, just play offense and special teams, man. Like I love that you're setting your sights on that, but just advice: if you want to be a Pro Bowl player, just be the fullback. There's really in the AFC, you just have to beat out Patrick Ricard.
Right. You just
That's it.
Beat out, you're
just the one guy.
Beat out Carson Steele or Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence. Your call.
Naldi Madubuike.
Yeah.
There's so many defensive tackles, man. Just play offense and you'll get to the Pro Bowl, I promise.
Yeah. Maybe I'll vote for you this year. I don't even know if I voted last year for anyone.
Alec Ingold, I guess. But he's going to retire soon, so. Scott Malik's still very young. Yeah. All right. Fun episode. Hopefully you guys enjoy that as much as we did. We'll do the defense on Thursday. And then we're actually like only a few weeks away from training camp, which is kind of crazy. So I think we're like 3 weeks out from training camp, which is insane.
Yep.
We'll get to some super chats real quick, starting with our guy, Dark Samus. He says Zion has S tier strength and athleticism, which I definitely agree with. He definitely is an all-pro level of strength and athleticism. Thinks he should be higher overall.
I think we put him higher than Bozeman for that reason, but any higher than that, I can't get there just yet. I'd love to.
I agree. James, y'all seen Pink Panthers tweets about the Bolts? No, and I'm not sure if there's something particular you wanted to talk about it there, but thank you for the super chat.
I have not seen a particular tweet that you might be referring to. I don't know which tweets there are.
I'm sure there's several, but if there's one in particular you would want us to touch on, if you're still in the chat, feel free and let us know. Our last super chat for today is from Dre. He says there should be no excuse to not have a good center after next year's draft. There should be a lot of good guys in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if this means he's automatically a good center, but if Zion is their center and they give him a deal, I understand why you don't take one in the first 3 rounds. But if Zion is not a good center and if they don't have a good center next year, I'm going to be very whiny. More than usual, maybe. I don't know. But I'm going to be very whiny if they, again, don't have center figured out.
I think for the Chargers, like what they would love to happen is that Zion becomes their long-term feature center at this point.
Yeah.
But yes, there's no excuse after the draft and free agency for them not to upgrade one of the other interior spots. I know Bradley Bozeman is technically under contract for 2 years. But theoretically, it should be much easier to go find a starting caliber guard or center in free agency next year, with the kind of cap space that the Chargers have. So
yeah,
there's definitely no excuse. Center draft sounds much better than last year. There were definitely a lot of guys who could have come out college that did not, that went back to school. So center class should definitely be better. But I think the Chargers internally are, at least according to the reporters, that they want Zion to be the center of the future.
Hey, man, if he's anything of the future for them, that makes me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. If him reaching his ceiling means he's playing center, then cool with me. It works for me. Like, I want the Chargers to have better players. And if Zion reaches his ceiling at center, then that works for me.
Yep.
All right, hour 20 on June 24th, tiering the offensive starters. Always fun. Appreciate you guys for jumping in here live as always. Good group today. Good super chats. Should be a lot of fun on Thursday as well to the defense. I think a little bit more interesting conversations on defense. More debatable players, I think, is probably on that side. So it should be fun. As always, make sure to leave us a rating, review, comment, like, subscribe. All that good stuff does help continue to grow the show. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you guys on Thursday. Bolt up.